to yourself. I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
Do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. Do not claim to know the ultimate truth about fire. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I am the void one.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void live. A bit of a late start here, so we're going to jump right into it. It's December 11th, 2024, and there have been some large and mysterious drones reported flying over parts of New Jersey. And I think this has happened in recent weeks, maybe in recent month. Who knows how long it's been happening, actually. And they appear to be able to avoid detection by traditional methods such as helicopter and radio, and according to a state lawmaker briefed by the Department of Homeland Security. In a post on the social media platform X, Assemblywoman Dawn Fantasia described the drones as up to 6 feet in diameter and sometimes traveling with their lights switched off. So some weird stuff's going over in Jersey. And fortunately, we have been blessed with, I don't know, just he's not present at the moment, but fortunately we've been blessed with Mark Steeves. So Mark is going to come on and talk about this for a little bit. So what do you guys think about these drones? Now, the Morris County Republican was among several states and local lawmakers who met with state police and Homeland Security officials to discuss the state of these sightings. And I think Mark is here with us from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, a good friend of mine, an associate, and a lot of the listeners of this show also listen to Mark's broadcast. And Mark has some insight on this a little bit. So I'm curious about it. So welcome, Mark Steeves. Thanks for coming on the broadcast, brother. It's good to have you here. Appreciate you coming on, man.
It's a pleasure to be here, Joe. It's been too long. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, brother.
Being patient with me as I made a coffee. I needed a little bit of energy to talk about these strange drones. And on that note, how are they being powered? No one seems to know. These things have not been seen taking off. They have not been seen landing. They are airborne perpetually through the night. And, you know, I don't know about you. I don't know that much about military tech, but I think we would have heard about some sort of innovation in these batteries, or I don't know. I mean, it just seems like it defies what's possible with these types of vehicles. Then again, the drones are reported to be the size of not just any an average car, but your average SUV. So these are, I mean, colossal sized drones flying through the air. So I guess, in theory, they could house a big battery or who knows what kind of propulsion system. But yeah, it's just very strange. And it makes me wonder if we're looking at something that goes beyond a nuts and bolts explanation, as the ufologists like to say.
Yeah, I mean, I seen that they were initially spotted during the what is it, the Picatinny Arsenal, which is that's a U.S. military research and manufacturing facility, and spotted over President-elect Donald Trump's golf course in Bedminster. So,
Yeah.
I know drones are legal in New Jersey, but if you can't detect them, like, I don't understand why they don't just. I mean, I don't know what the legalities of this are, but why isn't the military blasting one of these things out of the sky and inspecting it or something?
Well, officially, I've heard that they disappear off of radar when officials have tried to go up in the sky and track these things down. So, again, another reason why this might go beyond, a physical explanation. The whole tic tac phenomena has kind of swept the UFO field. Now it's the UAP field of research. There's some conspiracy theorists who question why that is, but beyond that, it does seem like the phenomena, whatever it is, has some sort of mind of its own, agency of its own, and reflects what we think about as humans. Like, culturally, I think the drone is a in a way a reflection of where our culture is at. In the same way, 100 years ago, people would see what looked like mystery airships, balloons, and such in the sky, and that was a reflection of the culture of their time. Whether those things are seen in the sky or not, or what those things actually are, I don't know that we could know for sure just based off of what we've been given so far. But yeah, it seems like this is more than just, well, now we have drones, and in the past we had flying saucers. I think they're inherently connected.
Hmm. You think they're connected to the UAP phenomenon? Is that what you're saying? Do you think they're connected to that?
Yeah, I think they're all just different names for the same thing. And I think even the phenomena itself can trick us in that way, where it almost like updates its operating system as we do. So it's not actually what we're seeing, it's just reflecting our biases and assumptions about what we would think of as an anomalous object in the sky. Think of it as an intelligent cloaking device that matches the perceptions of whatever's seeing it. So in ancient times, let's put ourselves in the shoes of non-modern people, if that's even possible. They might not have seen something technological in the sky because their world didn't have anything technological beyond maybe rudimentary tools. So to see something in the sky flying, it would be equated to a bird or another, creature rather than an object or a vehicle, right? So this is maybe a broader way of understanding what I'm talking about. But the reason why I say that is because the drones that have been seen over New Jersey, they're not coherent to any one structure. You'd think that if it was like a military operation, then they would all be uniform, that there would maybe be at best 2 or 3 varieties of drones that serve different functions. But it seems like these drones go beyond that even, and just have strange properties that don't reflect a real utility. And that makes me think that we're looking at something that's not actually human, or really it's not extraterrestrial as we might think of from what we get in our sci-fi films. I don't think it's extraterrestrial at all, but I don't think it's extraterrestrial in the sense that these are vehicles that have, pilots, which might be a little bit more obvious now with the drones, but that's been something that's been said about UFOs in the past. Obviously, there are sightings of, beings coming out of these craft. Take your pick on UFO encounter, whatever the CE rating is. But I think the fact is that even in those instances, we could still maybe explain those instances as a conscious phenomena, as enveloped in it as you would be in an abduction scenario. That's a lot more extreme than maybe just having one of these objects fly over your head. But nonetheless, you're engaging with the phenomena, and it's taking a piece of your imagination and using it to cloak itself, if that makes any sense.
Well, all right. So let's just go. And I appreciate your thoughts on this too, because you know me, I'm usually not keeping up with what's going on in the latest. Like all of my friends are really good at this, including you, really, really good at this. And you got a great podcast too. So you guys make sure you go listen to Mark's podcast if you haven't checked it out. But so what do we know, right? We know we got sightings in New Jersey. We know they've been spotted over military bases. We know they're not normal recreational drones. Now people are saying that they've seen them from Staten Island. They're saying they're the sizes of cars. Some people are saying, right?
Yeah.
All of the government agencies, the FBI, Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, they're all trying to figure out what the hell is going on with this. And nobody seems to have any answers. What I'm asking you, and I know you said you got a friend out there or something that's checking this stuff out. So what's the possibility of this just being like military, like Chinese tech, they're just taking photographs, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one of the more probable explanations. I like to look for the outliers that would maybe explain it in a different way, because I think no matter who's behind the drones, maybe one of the keys is for them to remain, unidentified. So they're going to want us to think they're Chinese or Russian or whoever, right? But, it's hard to say. There have been examples of, I heard one story where somebody said that a drone flew over their car. They realized this because the drone was so big, like I said, almost the same size as their SUV, flying above them, and they noticed that the clock on their dashboard went back an hour or forward an hour. Some sort of anomaly was noticed with the timing on the clock. And, missing time is always reported with UFO encounters. It's very rarely reported when someone sees like a, military jet flying over. But that doesn't mean, I'm not saying I'm ruling out the possibility of it being military, or that the militaries of the world have, strange science that goes into these sorts of drones and can do something like, affect the sensitive instruments on your car's dashboard. I mean, that seems probably fairly easy to do. But yeah, it's one thing to do that. It's another thing to change shapes or even fly in such a way that defies, in the instance of the Tic Tac more particularly, to fly in such a way that defies what we're able to do with aviation. Even in a scenario with the drone, it's still limited technology. It can't, do a 90-degree turn and consistently keep that speed. It's going to have to pause and change direction, right? Well, some of these drones, again, this is at night when they're being seen, so not a lot of visual cues to go off of. But at that, they have been reported to move in a very erratic and unconventional way, in a way that maybe would make you think that these were more than standard drones. So, yeah. And then again, the variety of shapes, Mark Normand and Joe List, two comedians that were at the comedy club that my friend I'm referring to, this is in the town where these drones are being sighted, this comedy club. So I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, Mark Normand and Joe List, they don't even really believe in that kind of stuff, and they saw a drone and it really freaked them out. So really, everyone's seeing these drones. It's not just crazy people like me. I haven't seen any myself.
All the people that in Jersey are seeing these things, right?
Well, and normal
the
people,
comedians too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course, but yeah, it's something that, at least in this one particular area, it's unavoidable. If you're outside, you're bound to see one. So it goes beyond your traditional UFO phenomena, because that tends to be a little bit more dodgy, right? These things tend to happen in a flash and then disappear. But this isn't the first time we've had a drone flap, as they're being called. In 2019, there was one over Colorado. People reporting it made its way to the news all over Boulder and Denver, I believe. They were seeing drones flying over the city.
Appreciate you, Ari, for the $9.99 super chat. Thanks, brother. Thanks for your support. All right. So this thing stinks already to me. Like, instinctively, I'm thinking, anytime, as well as I do, because we've both read enough intelligence papers to understand this. Like, anytime they want to put out a new law, there's always some kind of psyop, right? So we could also say, we're just speculating here, but we could also say that it's our government playing with us and then saying, oh, look at the drones. We got to make some new laws about drones. And this is the thing too. When all these government programs get together and they're like, man, we don't know what's going on or whatever, 9 times out of 10, it's going to cause a new law to come out. So before, everybody could just fly drones around, do whatever the hell they want. I think the only law is that you can't attach a gun to it, right? That's one of the laws. You can't attach a gun to a drone or something like that. But they're already talking about in the press that, and this is why it smells funny to me, that they're talking about making new laws about it because they don't know what's going on. So who's to say it's not our own intelligence saying, let's just fly these black drones around, freak everybody out, and get a law going, so we can control the sky.
It is interesting that the gentleman who has pretty much stayed in the headlines over the past week traveled through that area when he fled the scene of the crime, the smiling assassin, as they're being known, or the defiant assassin, as Wall Street Journal called them today. He shot CEO Brian Thompson in Manhattan and then was caught in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So for those who aren't familiar with American geography, he would have had to drive through New Jersey to do that. And who knows, maybe was very paranoid, thinking these drones were after him. If I was in that position, I might go so far to think that. Not that I'm sympathetic in any way to this guy. I don't condone that at all. As much as I dislike healthcare companies, nobody should go to that length to see change in the world. But it was kind of curious that these are the two stories that are, sort of soaking up the news headlines, at least here in the East Coast where I'm at. It's unavoidable. Everyone's talking about the drones, or they're talking about the assassin. And
that's another freaky thing too, man. It just seems like some weird stuff has been going on lately. Howard with the 50 super chat. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate the support. So do you think this is related, or do you think it's separate?
Well, whether they're related or not, I wouldn't know for sure. It does seem like there are other circumstances going on with the drones. But circumstantially, it's kind of interesting that the two stories collided in that way. Again, we'll probably never know what the real motivations of this guy is. Seems like he's a patsy to me, but surely he was probably freaked out by the drones, if he's not a complete MK Ultra mind warped assassin. But yeah, when it comes to these two news stories in particular, it seems like they're distracting from whatever the Biden administration is currently doing in the sunset before Trump. And Yeah, I think, rightly so. They're trying to keep all the heat off of them while they send millions of dollars to Ukraine before Trump can put an end to all that, right? So whatever keeps the people, distracted, fattened, and burping, I guess.
I'm going to say something kind of esoteric here that's probably going to throw some people off, but whatever, uh, so it's an occult kind of thing to say, but like, so Pluto just moved into Aquarius and is going to be here for the next, odd years or whatever, right? So I see a lot of crazy kind of Brave New World technology stuff happening, that could be that would freak some of us out, so to speak, right? Like you got the whole Warner von Braun thing where he talked about, yeah, man, they're gonna, the fake an alien invasion. And if I'm looking around now with, the court stuff, what's going on in court, the sightings that we've had, the drone thing, like they could easily set that up. I mean, they could do that next week. It's already set up and ready to go if they wanted to fake an alien invasion. Okay. But what is it that you really do you speculate anything at all? Like, do you even have an intuitive thought about what this is? Because people want to know what your actual opinion is on this,
Me?
Yeah.
My back's against the wall on what, particularly the drones?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think it's it's this phenomena. I don't think it necessarily.
You don't think it's just normal drone stuff at all, do you?
No.
Okay.
No, hey, I could be wrong. These kind of things tend to age poorly. So, who knows? In a week, we could find out that it was like some secret Elon Musk project that, him and Amazon are workshopping where they're going to deliver all your packages at night with drones. And that's why they're so big, because they're holding, cargo, right? That could be it, right? It could just be some company that's trying to, secretly test this kind of thing or make a case for it. But again, there's some strange anomalies, and it just seems to fit a pattern that I've noticed through all the conversations and the research I've done into this topic. It's not my main focus, but it's something that I'm always interested in hearing about. And yeah, it just seems to me like, again, with this sort of phenomena, it's not something that can be explained with nuts and bolts. I don't really think that there's necessarily a explanation physically for what this is. I think it's something to do with whatever otherworldly being, take your pick for how you want to explain that. Nephilim, Fourth Reich, Nazis, Anunnaki, whatever, right? I mean, there's clearly archons or whatever agency outside of our own human culture that is messing with us in this way. And I think they've done it throughout history. Some people color that as bad. Others say, well, there are angels, there are, wisdom keepers. They bring us light, Prometheus and such. Other people take that as, oh, well, it's all evil. I don't know, but I think it's just more of the same strange phenomena. And what else to expect? But mainly it reflects where we're at as human beings. As difficult as that might be to wrap your head around, I don't necessarily think that they're entities that we understand in a conventional way.
Right. Like some kind of bipedal alien or some kind of,
Well, that's trying to bring a convention to it. I think if we were really try to understand it in a tangible way, I think we have to look at plasma and ether, right? So sure. I just had a conversation on my podcast about plasma portals, right? And one of the ideas that was expressed to me was that plasma is the fourth state of matter, okay? It's what happens to a gas when it's heated. And when these plasmas are cooled, they can then transmediate into a physical substance. But they're still plasma. And the idea that was showed to me was sort of that these strange entities that we tend to see more often than not at night, whether that's, UFOs, aliens, ghosts, dogman, Sasquatch, whatever, we tend to see them more often than not in dark places, whether that's a dark hollow of a forest, inside of a cave, or just straight up at night. Maybe even in a basement, right?
So, are we talking about the same ectoplasma that in occult texts they say is the etheric substance that draws from the astral to form the physical?
Right. And what if this substance, of its own fruition can mess with us and take forms from the world of the living? Take your pick. The ape man, is kind of like a wild man, a version of our own self through the lens of nature. UFOs are kind of like a reflection of where we are as technological beings, always creating these like vehicles. But I think plasma. I think plasma is really more than we're giving credit. Like, our entire body is plasma. 99% of the universe is plasma, and particularly the part of our body that's plasma is the conscious part of our body.
Right.
So plasma seems to be conscious. Ectoplasm, I think that may be a part of this larger phenomena. That might be a particular expression of plasma, but the most interesting expression of plasma to me is ball lightning. Like, when you see ball lightning in person or even on film.
Yeah, I know. I've seen it. Yeah.
You can find like cell phone footage now of ball lightning. It's incredible the way this stuff moves, and to think that that's just plasma that's built up a really large amount of electricity. It's got a high voltage. What's going on with all the other plasma balls that aren't charged up with that much high voltage? What if these plasma balls are roaming around and picking up little pieces of dust and living matter and DNA, and then somehow at night that coagulates into a drone, UAP type of thing, or it coagulates into a dog man, or take your pick, and maybe the
or a shadow person,
Right. Shadow person would probably be the more simple thing that it could manifest into. And how often do people see strange shadows in their house, right? Like, maybe these things aren't necessarily evil. It's just our fear of them that gives us this reflection of negative.
No. Let me tell you something, man. I think you're onto something with this. One of the reasons why is because the second or third time that I had a really good OBE, I don't know if I told you about it, but I got halfway out of my body and was trying to release myself, and I saw these blobby Rorschach looking things just floating around, and they shoved me back into my body, dude. They pushed me back in, right? Like, whatever it was definitely intelligent, for sure, right? Like, it was there, it was intelligent. Secondly, we've been reading books on this channel, and then like Muldoon wrote a book about the OBE experiences back in the 1920s, and he talked about plasma, right? And he said the same thing that you're saying, that in fact our etheric body is made up of this plasma. So when we move consciously, like say I move my arm, or I'm thinking about taking a drag on my smoke or whatever, it's not my physical body that's actually doing it. It's my plasma body. The physical body reacts to it. So when we get out of body in our etheric double, that's what we're actually made up of,
Yeah. Yeah. And that explains this conscious first perspective of the world so much better. To me, when you understand the world this way, and, sure, I just had a conversation about it yesterday, and I'm all charged up now on this topic, but it's something that I think, excuse me, hold on. It's one of these enlightening facts that just bleeds into everything else, and when you understand that we're plasma first and consciousness first, all these other things start to make a lot more sense, And again, I'm not taking credit for any of this. I'm just an armchair researcher who spends enough time paying attention to kind of feel like I'm putting something together. So I really appreciate you saying that I'm onto something, because that just confirms my instincts. But also it makes me optimistic that the world we live in is not only a lot stranger than we've been taught, but it's a lot more accessible than we've been taught to deal with. Right. So we're so used to learning about the world of the supernatural and the paranormal from maybe a more fearful perspective, the perspective of the other, and you and I have talked about this a ton because, we as people who are interested in the occult or magic, we're constantly faced with people who are telling us that, oh, we're bad, or we're wrong, or we're evil for talking about or bringing attention to these subjects. I think the same is true with these plasma beings, where if you walk around ignorant to these beings, they will treat you the way you want to be treated. It's that old golden rule, right? If you're ignorant of them, or worse, afraid of them, what if they appear that way to you in those special circumstances where, whatever liminal boundaries keep us from normally seeing these beings, the veil is lifted temporarily. And because we're so unaccustomed to these sort of strange experiences, our fear colors the plasma.
Sure. I
And
get what you're saying.
shows us an entity that's far scarier than it has to be. Whereas maybe someone like a wise elder, I don't want to just, glorify the pagan here. Maybe like a wise priest even, walks into that experience with knowing and confidence and is met with a being that then offers them wisdom in return rather than, a horror show, right? So that, I think, is a part of it, where people are looking up in the sky and these plasma beings that are more active for whatever reason over New Jersey right now. They're like, oh, hey, the humans are looking at us. What do we look like? Well, a flying toaster. Oh, yeah, let's look like a flying toaster. Okay, cool. Like I as comical and like fantastically silly that might sound, I think the world we live in is so alive and conscious that we're just only beginning, just like we don't know the whole depths of the ocean. Like we're just beginning to understand the full ecosystem that we're a part of. And that's what all these cryptid UFO encounters really are, is like us entering that jungle for the first time, the way, the British did in the Congo. And they're like, oh my God, the gorilla, it's not just pure legend, it's a real beast, like this is the same, it's the same thing. Like we're encountering our shadow selves in this plasma duality that we're stuck in. And every night when the plasma cools, these things start roaming around. And maybe it plays into that whole Bible thing. Excuse me, let me not be blasphemous on your wonderful program. Maybe it plays into the old folklore of the Bible, which is that these fallen angels are somehow jealous of our status as living beings, right? And maybe that's kind of what's going on here, where these plasma beings, they're not quite whole, they're not quite physical, but they come here, take on these shapes in order to, LARP as physical beings for their temporary allotted time.
All right. Well, let's talk about some things that might add up to this plasma thing. One, I've had a couple of guests on the show that talked about the plasma and electric universe, that it makes more sense, right? Number one. Number two, Manly P. Hall, Mark Booth, and some other people that wrote some fantastic text talked about how that we were etheric beings before we were physical beings, that we grew skin over evolutionary time, right? Three, you've got a section of the Gnostics like Samael Aun-Weor, which a lot of people think is batshit, but he talks about plasma beings on other planets, right? The reason why we're not finding life even in our solar system is because it's not life as we are life. It's life as plasma or certain types of entity beings. There's actually societies and stuff that live on these planets. We just don't recognize them. We can't visually see them through our bodies, that kind of thing. And then you got Muldoon and 3 or 4 other people in these OBE texts that talk about the same damn thing, that our etheric body is made up of this like plasma thing, that's what we're actually made up of consciously, you know. And science has done experiments about consciousness. They can't figure it out. When a body dies, they have taken electric impulses to the human body. What does it do? It just flaps around. It doesn't do shit, right? It's not aware. It's not conscious. It's just reacting to the electricity. Yet when we're conscious, we can do all kinds of sort of intelligent things, you know, like multiple computations our brain does, it seems that way, right? Instantaneously. But as soon as we're not conscious, the body, and they've kept bodies alive, right, or tried to. They've even cut the brain in pieces and saw that it had wireless signals and things like that, but still can't get the body to act like a human body. I know this sounds weird, without, quote, consciousness being there. The etheric double is real. I know that. That's what I know for a fact. The rest of it is just kind of adding up in my head, you know, based on what you're saying too.
And a book, you mentioned reading books on the show, which I'm so happy people are still doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. But no, seriously, this book, Robert Temple's A New Science of Heaven, kind of gets into what I'm talking about in a really interesting way. And I don't know how you're going to react to this, but I have created some cyber animas that I use on my podcast. Can I explain?
Sure, man. Go for it.
All right. So there's an AI program that I found, and I'll share it with you. I don't mind sharing it, but I jokingly call it my cyber anima on the podcast because it's so uncanny, like the way this reacts to your questions and the amount of information it can
So you're
deliver.
saying anima, not enema, right?
God, no. I shove it like an HDMI cable up my rear end. No.
No, I got you. Anima. Okay.
And, yeah. So what this program does is called Notebook LM. It's by Google, so it's free. But of course, you know, they're reading everything you're putting in here and probably selling your data to China. But there's a trade-off in everything. But yeah, Notebook LM is so fascinating because you can go and take a whole PDF, upload it to this, and the AI learns the PDF within 2 seconds. Not even, you know, not even exaggerating. It learns it almost instantly, and you can just say like, "Hey, tell me about this. Tell me about that." You know, referencing anything from the text, and it'll just bring it up. It'll give you the sources for where it was said. So, long story
Very
short,
cool.
I have Robert Temple's A New Science of Heaven in Notebook LM, and I asked it what a Kordylewski cloud is, which I think this is a big aspect to what we're dealing with and why we may have actual paranormal seasons on the earth. Like the earth may go through seasons where there's more paranormal activity than others. And if that's the case, well, maybe that is definitive proof that plasma is somehow behind that, because it says here that the Kordylewski clouds are made primarily of plasma, which is considered the fourth state of matter, right? We've established that. So the Kordylewski clouds have subatomic particles and dust, and obviously plasma. So these are larger than the Earth, and they're located in between the Earth and Moon's orbit, and they are affected directly by the sun. So as the sun is sending out its solar flares, and this is affecting the Kordylewski clouds, and just like the clouds in our atmosphere are affected by the light, it's the same thing with these quote unquote space clouds. But scientists are basically calling these clouds super brains, and that these brains actually could function, or these clouds could function in the same way our brains do, and that the dust and the subatomic particles are sort of like a neural network that information is passed through, and that these Kordylewski clouds may actually be the astrological influences that we feel, right? Because if these constellations that we're using as sort of guide markers in the sky, to understand how we pass through time and how those bodies in the heavens influence us, maybe these plasma clouds are sort of more tangible way of understanding that information exchange. It's more sophisticated than, well, when the constellation's in this spot, it does this to the earth. Like maybe there's a real relationship, a communication going on between those constellations and whatever they represent, and the plasma as an intermediary between them and us. So yeah, it's fascinating to be at this point in history where, we can understand things, wherever you stand on cosmology. Obviously there's some issues about the moon landing and all this other stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But when it comes to these aspects of cosmology, they sort of go beyond that, and they're also in a realm of science that isn't really funded. Plasma tends to be kind of like overlooked in many ways, hence the thesis of this book, which is he's arguing that plasma physics are absolutely fundamental to our understanding of the universe and consciousness, and maybe that's exactly why it's being overlooked. And again, going back to this paranormal seasons idea, maybe there's a real reason why they're keeping this from us, because the institutions that are in charge are somehow aligned with these plasma beings. I mean, if these are like disembodied consciousness, maybe this is what possesses people. Maybe this is what the gods are. These gods,
angels,
are
jinn, everything paranormal. Yeah.
They can take on whatever physical appearance they want because it's a transmedium substance. It's not limited to form the same way we are as three-dimensional, flesh and blood beings, right? So yeah man, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. If people are like, well, how'd you get here from drones? I think really the truth is that drones are just a reflection of our hyper specialized technology. Like we have a certain type of technology right now that you can look at a drone and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good like summary of humans in 2020, whereas the UFO of the 60s, very art deco and, shiny and chrome, that was very much a reflection of the style of that day. I mean, you look at the cars of that day, they all had chrome and big, bold curves and swoops. And, it's something that I think we can't really underestimate. It might seem like a insignificant outlier, the aesthetics of these things, but if we're not touching these objects and we're only looking at them, maybe we should put more stock in the aesthetics or the visual aspects of these things we're seeing.
Well, just like, I mean, consciously, if it's all one collective, reality is only going to reflect what you're creating or putting into it, right? So we have a as above, so below kind of thing that wisdom is handed down to us since the beginning of time. And everything that we do on this earth that's fundamental is reflected as a reality of the universe. For example, in space, we have light and dark, right? Suns and stars. And then we got this like massive area of darkness in between them. But on Earth, here's the thing. We figured out, it took us a while, but we figured out that we could transfer information through light with ones and zeros. So we just now got to fiber optics as far as understanding technology. The communication that I'm communicating with you is through light, and it's through on and off, alpha, omega, right? Light and darkness. The way I look at this whole thing is consciousness is trying to create life, right? And we are a biological program that it created, so to speak. The rest of the universe is doing its thing. But I definitely, and I've been thinking about this for quite some time. I definitely have always thought that there was something to this whole plasma thing. I mean, bro, we've had ships that have come back into our atmosphere from space with plankton on them. Doesn't even make sense, man.
it would make sense if these are, their origin is underwater. If
Right.
these are all USOs, unidentified submersible objects, they're flying and they're submersing themselves into the ocean. I think it makes a lot of sense that they would carry
But
plankton.
how do our ships, though? Some of our ships have come back with plankton on them and have only went into space.
Oh, okay. Huh. Interesting. Well, obviously you've heard of the waters above concept, but that's kind of what I was talking about earlier when I said, the moon landing and the Van Allen belt. Like, I don't necessarily believe that space is a vacuum. I think
I don't
it's
either.
more like it's something, again, it could be that plasma functions a lot more like water than we know. What is our blood other than a plasma? And we are how much percentage water? So I think the lines between what a plasma is and isn't is a little too blurry for me to fully express. Again, I'm not a physicist, so it's a little bit out of my element as a podcaster to discuss the nuances of plasma. But I do think that human observation accounts for something, and people have time immemorial described what's going on in the sky in terms of ocean, in terms of nautical terms. We sort of have this like symmetry of talking about the heavens the same way we would maybe talk about seafaring. There's a couple of examples of that. The most obvious would be that we call them spaceships and not space cars, right? So yeah, or space planes maybe would be a more appropriate term, but no, we call them spaceships. We don't call planes ships, we call them airplanes, right? So it's very interesting that that is the terminology, and that maybe the bounds between us and the heavens are a lot more definitive than our governments want us to believe. For what end, I don't know. Maybe it's for their own ego and just wanting to have another black budget excuse. But I think there's probably something philosophical at the heart of it, where if we understand our reality in total, we become inherently more powerful because we're in a conscious universe. So the only way to limit someone in a conscious universe is to keep information from them, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's at the heart of it. And maybe these drones, these UAPs, these cryptids, these strange phenomena, they're in a way trying to wake us out of that. Who knows? Maybe we're afraid of these things for all the wrong reasons. Maybe they're just showing us what's inside of us, and that fear that we project onto it is maybe holding us back from the transformation that's kind of waiting for us on the other side. I don't mean to get all new agey and hippie on you guys, but it does seem like at the heart of it, whenever somebody has one of these experiences, they're changed forever. Not always for the better, unfortunately. But that might be our culture's fault. Maybe we don't equip people to deal with these things, so it traumatizes them beyond repair. Whereas if someone from maybe a more traditional culture, and again, I don't want to put indigenous people on a high horse because they're equal humans just like the rest of us, but maybe their culture is more conducive to something like this, and that's why we have stories from many different tribes around the world of them taking wisdom from these beings and learning things from these beings. And even in our ancient cultures for that preceded the modern advanced cultures that now don't seem indigenous at all, those started as indigenous cultures at some point, and many of those cultures have stories at their origin of receiving information from whether it's the Yellow Emperor of China, who was supposedly a dragon that took flight and flew off into the heavens after he reigned for 1,000 years, or one of the many gods of the Vedic texts who are battling each other in the sky with what seemed like advanced aircraft. We can go through the whole Gilgamesh and how those beings lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? So, and then obviously the pantheons of the Greek and even the pagan, you have all these different gods who seem human in many ways or interact with what are explicitly human beings side by side simultaneously. And I don't know if, now 20 or 30, well, I'm 30 years old now. At 30 years old, I don't know. Like when I was 15, I would have thought all of that stuff is just imagination and folklore. Now I'm a full believer. I think there's truth in everything, whether it's far-fetched to take an analogy as literal or figurative. Maybe there's a blurry line there for me, but I think when it comes to mythology, like we should turn to those stories to better understand what's going on with something like a drone UAP sighting. As maybe off course as that might sound, that's kind of my instincts with it.
Well, I mean, we call this. I think we call this stuff magic, Mark, and mysticism, and all these different things, right? Because we don't understand how it works technologically. That's what I think, right? Like we don't understand advanced beings. We don't understand plasma and how it works. We don't understand the fifth element, right? We don't get it. Just like if you and I time traveled back to the 1800s and we took a Wi-Fi router, a cell phone, a couple of TVs and everything, and we said, look, we're going to talk to each other in different countries, people would hang us, man. They'd hang us up by our necks, right? They would think that we were, sages or wizards or whatever. So I also think that there's a technology of consciousness that we don't understand, right? That has been called many different things like aliens, magic, angels, jinn, stuff like that. That maybe the reason why we don't understand it is because we chose to be in this human form, to live in a physical body and to forget everything, just as an experiment. Who the hell knows? But it seems to me that everything in the universe is functioning consciously. Every natural thing, from the atom to the blade of grass all the way out into space, right? So there has to be some kind of field that we're all a part of,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this is a better way of understanding it. And, I don't think it's a perfect way of understanding it, because how do you wrap your head around something like a plasma? But, it's the best we can do. How do you use consciousness to understand consciousness? This is sort of a parallax or a paradox.
Paradox,
somewhere.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it. Like when I read Madame Blavatsky, when she talked about the ectoplasma, or they talked about these things in theosophy, and some people even said that she could manifest physical things into reality. Which, look, I'm open to it, but for me, as like a void walker, so to speak, I have to experience it. I'm a doubting Thomas. I do have to touch it. I do have to experience it. So when I had the etheric OBE, which is far different than a lucid dream, far different than anything I've ever experienced, if you would have talked to me about plasma, what you're talking about now, before that event in my life, I would have been like, this sounds like complete horseshit, right? But now that I've experienced that etheric OBE, what you're saying makes more sense to me about the opening of all these different things that we've recorded in history too. If you think about like the Abrahamic text and stuff, like the older Jewish text, they talked about gods that walked among them. They never said where they came from. They just called them Lord, so to speak, right? Where did they come from? That kind of thing. And it's funny that we get to this point from these drones, but that could explain the drones. It could explain all the UFO phenomena that we've seen.
Absolutely.
But why is it? Let me ask you this though: what is it about the nighttime, right? Like even Whitley Strieber, when he was on this broadcast, he said, when I wrote Communion, I really believed that there were these beings that flew in from another planet that stole us out of our beds and all these different things. But now, after he visited the Monroe Institute, he said, now I'm starting to think that this has more to do with what consciousness is than it is a being from another planet in a different galaxy or something like that. So I wonder how that works with the plasma kind of, theory.
I kind of touched on this earlier. I might have said a lot in a brief breath there, so I'll reiterate it again. But I think it has to do with plasma's interaction with temperature and how nighttime, the earth cools down, and these plasmas that are excited by the sun's energy all day and maybe invisible because of that now take form. And they take form in the shape of things that they have an analog within them. So let's say there's a source of gas in the earth, right? These things tend to be seen around swamps and caves and mountains, places where gas seeps from the earth. Again, I don't want to give a mundane explanation for fantastical things, but it has to start somewhere, right? You can't create nothing something from nothing. So gas, right? Let's say we have a solid that, is heated up into a liquid, which is then heated up into a gas. Well, gases are heated into plasmas. And if there's a particular type of gas that's seeping out of a swamp or a cave or a spring that is here on a mountain or wherever, right? Maybe this ambient gas over time becomes plasma, picking up, whatever subatomic particles are in its path as it sort of meanders and floats about. Let's say there's a carcass of a deer. Let's say there's a carcass of a wolf. Let's say there's, some trash on the side of the road. What if all of that, effluence contributes to this plasma? And then that's why we see when this stuff cools and manifests at night, this kind of ghostly, freakish, almost morbid looking thing, because it's like almost actually cleaning, cleansing, collecting the unused parts that are now subatomically, fading into the ether, right? This is the recycling. Again, I don't know, this might
You're talking
sound
about
very,
maybe it's the spiritual rectum, right? So it's getting rid of the shit, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you prompted me on this about like nighttime and light and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I think at night, these plasmas cool and they take form and they take agency, and the whatever, admixture they comprise of based on their, circumstances and their environment, I think that contributes to what they look like. And that might be why we have a swamp ape and a yeti and a orang pendek and a Sasquatch and all of these man-like wild man, because we're kind of like the dominant species on the earth. So it would make sense that the plasma would then mimic us, but it mimics us in this sort of wild form because we're in the wild. But it also seems to take the environment with it, right? And this is what nature does. I mean, you look at a wolf in Canada and you look at a wolf in South America, let's say Argentina, not too far all that different as far as climate goes. Canada, and it's much colder, but there are places in Argentina where it gets very cold and there's extreme heights. But the wolf, the maned wolf that lives in South America is much different than the gray wolf that lives in Canada. And there's environmental factors for this. There's, biologists, they have a name for this sort of thing. It's like, ecosystem mimicry, something like that, where, the same species can have all these different variations based on climate and the fauna, the flora of the area. Right.
Kind of like when we have polar bears that are white and aggressive in the North Pole, and then we have black bears here that aren't that aggressive, but they're black, and they just eat berries and shit, right? Like,
even just within the black bear species, because, polar bears, brown bears, black bears, they're all from a common bear ancestor theoretically. But even just within the black bear species, you have, black bear that live in the state of New York that have a much different lifestyle than black bears that live in Mexico. And, black bears live in a lot of places in the world. They live in Japan, they live in China. Black bear is probably one of the I think most common species of bear. So you see a lot of variation within that species. So you'll have like sort of subspecies of these black bear.
Sure.
And,
So you're saying that these plasma beings could be a product of that environment, like say in Arkansas, there's a certain kind of Sasquatch that people see that's really just a plasma being at a certain time.
Think of the ecosystem of having like a soup, and every unique thing that comprises that ecosystem is like an ingredient in this soup. And then that soup sort of like forms itself in this ectoplasmic like way into these entities, And listen, I'm speculating. I just had a conversation with Joshua Cutchin that probably colored this conversation a little bit. And then, of course, my conversation with Brad Lale from the Awakened podcast about the plasma stuff. So, yeah, it's definitely one of those, like the plasma thing is one of those pieces of information that when you hear about it, at least for me, it was like another key that unlocked some new connections with all these other ideas that I've had spinning around in my head. So yeah, this isn't a fully formed concept. It's sort of more or less me speculating about the nature of the paranormal through the lens of plasma. And yeah, I think it just seems to be something that is localized. And maybe that's why, is because the plasma is inherent to the medium. Like it's reflecting, again, this concept of it reflecting what it's a part of. Just like when you see these UAPs or UFOs, it's taking a piece of your consciousness and using that to sort of distinguish itself, right? So at least visually.
So would there be anything that your friends in New Jersey, is there anything that they're telling you that kind of goes along with this, or are you just basing this off of a theory, right? Like from the reports?
That is based off. So full disclosure, a lot of the stuff I learned about the New Jersey drones came from the Mysterious Universe podcast, one of my favorite podcasts. I support them monthly or whatever, so I get their plus show and all that. They did a really good job covering the story. So as soon as I finished listening to that, I called my friend Mike, because to my surprise, the town he works and lives in is the exact town where these drones are being talked about. So I'm like, oh crap, I've been there before. I know that town. Let me call my friend Mike. So I call him, and to my, expectations, yeah, it was exactly like the Mysterious Universe guys reported, where there are all these strange outliers that made this seem like more than just some unidentified drones being piloted by humans. And Mike said that he saw the drones flying over his home all night. They didn't stop. They didn't land and come back. They were just perpetually flying. That alone defies explanation. Now, you can argue, oh, well, the military, obviously, they have advanced technology. Obviously, they have batteries that can last probably weeks or whatever, right? I'm not going to put that past the military. I think that's very plausible that they've invented some type of battery that can last a really long time. But again, we're not seeing these things, we're not seeing them land. We're not seeing them collide into anything either. It's defying what physical objects do when they're flying in the sky. So this was a couple of days ago. I'm kind of blanking on some of the other details that Mike shared with me. I should have wrote these things down, but my flashes of insight always come to me when I'm driving, and that's when I mean, you've been on the phone with me probably more than a handful of times while I'm driving, so you get it. I'm just out there in the world, and my mind is roaming. But yeah, the main thing was that people who, like I mentioned, Mark Norman, Joe List, like these are very interesting witnesses for something like this, because you can easily listen to like hours of their personality on a podcast and get a pretty good idea of the type of person they are.
Yeah.
And the fact that they saw these drones and had a visceral reaction that changed the tone of the night. That was what Mike told me. And comedians, their whole career, their whole job on a night-to-night basis is based around the emotions of the crowd and keeping things positive and happy, right? And the whole tone of the night changed for them. They saw these drones and it really disturbed them. And I guess it was kind of felt in the show, like maybe they brought it up, or I wasn't there, so I can't speak to it. I don't know that it made the show better or worse, but it definitely was sort of felt that they kind of were disturbed by it. And that couldn't be hidden. So, and a lot of people are, because, the government, the local government hasn't given a great explanation. And Mike also mentioned that he has seen no police cars on the road where he normally would have. And instead he's been seeing these blacked out SUV looking cars, like, sort of Fed cars. So that's another thing too. Like, this isn't being taken lightly.
Right.
Officials are taking this very seriously. Now, does that mean that it's a foreign threat? Does that mean it's Iran, Russia, China? I mean, it could be. But then again, like if this is an alien phenomena or some sort of trickster plasma kind of entity thing, maybe it wants us to think that it's China or Russia. Maybe it wants to stir the government up, like I don't think that we can really understand the mind of something like this in that way. I just don't, maybe that sounds like frustrating to people who want to have a more conventional explanation, but based on what I've heard, it sounds like this could be, again, more fitting with the whole UAP phenomena, which seems to be non-physical.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Department of Transportation, the local police, they're all working together. That's what they're reporting anyways. They're all working together right now to try to figure out what the hell this is. Now, think about, if they're telling the truth, how rare that is for us. But no one knows what it is. With all the technology that we have, they don't know what it is. That's kind of freaky, right? I mean, it's a little bit freaky, especially if these things are what people are saying, man. Like if they're the size of cars, they're just sitting there floating around all night. They can't triangulate the signals back to anybody's controlling these things, No, but they don't even know where the hell they're being controlled from. So if you and I go outside, we fly a drone, and the government taps into their tech and stuff, they can figure out that we're flying a drone pretty easily. It's not hard for them. But when they say they can't figure it out, something's afoot, man. And anything, Mark, that's unexplained is going to scare people. It's just the way it is. So.
Yeah, no, it's a scary thing, but then again, it could all just be a distraction, like we were saying before, to cover up what's going on with, Biden or Trump. Take your pick. I mean, obviously, there's been 2 attempts on Trump's life, so it could all be directed at him. You mentioned the Bedminster golf course.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, and the military base too. Here's the thing. We don't, if you really think about how much money is tied up into, you guys got to look into this. I don't like talking about politics too much, but the amount of money that's tied up into trades, into what's been happening, before Trump is insane, right? Like Trump has Trump is a threat to certain companies. Let's just put it that way. He's a threat to certain industries, certain trade groups, certain companies, and certain little groups inside of our government. He's just a threat, and he scares them. Now, why in the hell there would be drones that we don't even know how the hell they're flying have anything to do with Trump? I have no idea. But I still don't think they caught that assassin that took out that CEO guy. They hadn't caught him, have they? So there's all kinds of weird shit going on. Did they catch him?
Yeah, have you not been paying attention?
No, I don't even have time to watch the news. Right? I just, like, when we did this podcast, I just got off work, man. I still got paint on my hands.
You see my screen?
That's what the sumbitch looks like?
Yeah. That was him being pulled into booking somewhere, a courtroom somewhere, and as the media or journalists were taunting him for a sort of anything they can get out of him, I guess he turned and yelled at them. And this just seems like it's total psyop, patsy, MK Ultra.
That's what I was going to say. Look, yeah.
Like, this is what he says. Allegedly, he said while being pushed by police, "It's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience." That could be something a patsy says. I mean, he might not necessarily be saying that the healthcare CEO was an insult or what's going, that might not be a statement about healthcare. That could just be him saying it's an insult to the American people that I'm being put up for this. But then again, I don't want to seem sympathetic at all to this guy. I don't condone that kind of thing.
It looked like a dark web hit job when I first saw it, honestly. I don't know if you've ever been on the dark web, but they have assassins on there, right? So,
sure. Well, and as more information comes out about this guy, it just seems the whole thing seems very shady. It could be that this is just a staged event, again, to throw the healthcare industry into jeopardy and bring, that into the forefront while all these other things are kind of put on the back burner, like what's going on in the Middle East and Ukraine. But yeah, I don't know. I think the weird synchronistic aspects of this whole crime are strange. There's a whole thing with the McDonald's symbolism, and there's pictures of this guy on social media. He's got his Twitter. It's all, there's all these clues and things that he's alluded to in his Twitter. But it seems like the story they're going with is that, or the explanation they're going with is that he was disgruntled because of a back injury that he was denied care for. And now, because of that, he has a political vendetta against the healthcare industry. And this was his way of expressing, vigilante justice against what he sees as a corrupt healthcare system, which, I don't think that's necessarily unbased. Like that's a pretty, established notion that the healthcare industry has a lot of issues and is probably corrupt, right? So I'm definitely not an expert on that by any means. But again, I don't think any person with a sane mind would condone changing that by starting to assassinate CEOs. But then again, if they want to turn people up into a revolt and cause some sort of political action that's going to threaten whatever Trump represents, or who knows, maybe this Trump's behind this in some covert way, I really do. I don't rule anything out, right? Because we saw how the George Floyd thing was very fishy, and there was that whole backstory of counterfeit money going around in that area, and how a couple of those guys happened to be agents that had worked together in different capacities, including Floyd, who was an informant to a certain extent with those same exact gentlemen. So yeah, it's just, very, very strange that we're seeing all this happen. And, this is a supposed kid from the right side of the tracks. He, graduated from an Ivy League school, UPenn, came from a wealthy, multi-million-dollar family in Maryland.
Right.
So it has all the hallmarks of maybe an MK Ultra type of situation, and again, like I don't condone any of it, but I do see where the healthcare industry needs to be, amended. But what if this is their Hegelian dialect way of making the healthcare industry even worse, and I think that's tends to be the way things flesh out with politics is they say, oh, well, hey, isn't this bad the way it is? Let's change it. And then somehow it ends up worse. When they get all the people worked up to change it, it ends up worse in the end. And I think that's the Hegelian dialect. I might not be speaking to that in a sophisticated way, but yeah, that's my assessment.
Well, Mark, it's always good to talk to you, brother. I haven't talked to you in a while, and I appreciate you coming on the broadcast. I know you said you could stay for about an hour. I think I kept you a little bit longer. So, yeah, no, man, like I listen to your podcast. I listen to quite a few podcasts, actually, Mysterious Universe, stuff like that, same kind of stuff you do. But I don't really get to keep up with the times anymore because I used to, my main source of income used to just be the podcast. And so then I had time to, research and stuff. Now it's, I got to work, right? So I work all day. So when I got home and you were like, hey, I'll come on tonight and talk about this drone thing. I'd briefly heard about the drones through other podcasts, didn't know much about it, So for you to just pop in here and say like, man, talking about the plasma stuff, all of these different things, man, this is enough for me to sit around and think about for weeks, actually. Because I'm just saying, bro, because it goes along with a lot of the stuff. Like, if you go back on this show, we've read countless books on this stuff. And the plasma theory is what goes along with out-of-body experience, the cosmogony of man, spiritually, and occult text. It goes along with a lot of it, as I'm sure you've thought about too. So it's pretty cool to talk about, man. It's good to have you on here.
Absolutely. Well, and I noticed there's no the formats change a little bit. So I'm guessing are you just streaming to YouTube right now?
Yeah, for right now. I don't even have time to edit the podcast right now, man, because like I've got to get myself out of the hole that I put myself in,
I think it would be cool if you and I did like a once a week or twice a month type of live stream. I know we've said this in the past, and I've probably not followed up with my words. So I apologize on that. But I have been able to live stream now. I got an upgrade to my internet that I pay for each month, so I'm able to live stream. Whereas in the past, it would just be so shoddy that I just felt like I was it just made my whole podcast look like I'm a huge amateur, So now that I can actually do it, I'm like, oh, maybe I should live stream more often. And I've tested it out a couple times. So if you're live streaming on YouTube with StreamYard, we can cross stream and have it live on both of our channels. It'll be a way for both of us to stay in touch, have more interesting conversations like this, which I always appreciate talking with you off the air and on the air. And you're a friend of mine. I consider you a friend, beyond just, someone that I know through podcasting. So yeah, man, I figured now's a good time to ask you. And I kind of was inspired by the past few weeks of being like, I better do a live stream because my YouTube channel's growing and I should capitalize on that. So yeah, man, I don't know if that's something you have time for, but if you would have me as more of a weekly guest, or you wanted to come up with like a cross stream type of show, Fringe meets My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, I'd be more than happy to make this a more regular thing, because you have a lot of insights. You're great at hosting. You're great at keeping the conversation going. Not to do too much, back shop talk or anything, but I just feel like we have a great rapport that shines through with the shows we do.
Yeah, man, we'll definitely do something on the regular. Like I've considered not broadcasting 3 times a week just because I'm just exhausted, man. I don't get any me time, but now. Back in the day, I would have a guest on every freaking night, right? I was doing like 4 or 5 nights a week, and now it's down to 3. And things like I'm 42 years old now, right? And I'm still in this shack, bro, podcasting. I mean, it's what I love to do, okay? but I'm getting to the point to where my body's starting to start speaking to me in a way that's like, all right, listen, man, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. Keep doing what you love, but you know, it's time for you to start taking care of yourself, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. So you being able to
let me say,
come on would actually help, I think, you know.
and I think we, you know, again, like I'm an optimist. I'm going to see the good and the positive and everything. And I think one of the good things that Trump represents is maybe some an even playing field on the social media platforms, and that hopefully will carry over to YouTube, and maybe some laws will be actually passed. I mean, again, like I'm optimistic, but it could be total Patriot Act 3.0 type of nonsense, you know. But either way, if it does bode well for us as content creators, maybe we'll see in the next couple of months YouTube become more of a you know, sort of a free market that it once was, rather than like an algorithm dictatorship where Mr. Beast and all these other, you know what's are making a bunch of weird content for kids and somehow making millions of dollars and other nonsense where they basically do the equivalent of smashing a watermelon with like a what do you call it, a whisk, you know?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
It's just like they're like, it's just so stupid what's going on with the mainstream. And I think if anything, the result of Trump stirring things up with the Silicon Valley people, maybe we'll see like a more free market with YouTube. A lot of people have been kind of predicting that. At least we've seen that.
They're going to have to adapt. I mean, because the thing is, bros, is you don't say no, right? Like if they say you can't talk about this, that's what they've done to me. They've taken videos down, just taken them down and said, look, you violated this. You can't talk about it. Okay, whatever. But I still am going to keep talking about it. And I think as long as the bigger people in the industry don't back down on that, it'll change. And I think it's starting to change a little, you know, even though people say, well, they're shills or whatever. They could be shills. Who cares? As long as the bigger people in this industry that have really big audiences do not back down on the censorship thing, we're going to be okay. Right. I think, you know.
Well, and that's going to bode well for people like us who, you know, are on the periphery. Our shows aren't huge, but we definitely are in contact with people who have larger audiences, and there's just going to be a ripple effect, like even the resurgence effect too, where people are going to go back and maybe even listen to old episodes of the shows we've been on and be like, oh, what are these guys up to? So I'm very optimistic for 2025. You know, I think as much as things are going to probably be as crazy as they were during Trump's first term, and that wasn't necessarily his doing, but we don't need to get into politics. So I think if anything, it's just going to be more fodder for us skeptic, conspiracy, open-minded types to debate and, you know, speculate and philosophize. So I'm excited. I think life has kind of put me in a similar place where I'm kind of in my own shack over here with my books and doing my podcast. And yeah, man, it's just something that, and by the way, I don't have to go. I got more time if you want.
Well, here's the thing. Don't get me wrong, bro. I love, I'm always going to do this until the day I'm dead. Okay. It's just, I can't, until it makes sense practically, I can't put as much time into it. So anybody that wants to do like regular stuff with me, I'm all for it, because that helps me. It helps the audience too, you know, instead of me going, shit, I just got off work at 8:00. I still got paint all over me. Like, what the hell am I going to do a show about? Right. You know, like I need help. Right. You know what I mean? So like you coming along and talking would be great.
We're gonna do it. Yeah, I think 2025 we're gonna see a live show on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy channel, and we'll definitely need to do something where you're a regular part of that, and maybe even just the co-host. We cross stream, live stream, whatever, however it pans out. but I know I'm committed to it, and I've got plenty of people I can get in touch with to be guests to talk to the both of us. So if there's ever a day where you can't make it, that's not even a big deal, because I'm just trying to do more of this. People seem to like the live stream stuff. I've always been kind of against it because
well, if you're worried about how like production, how good is the show going to be, a live stream is always a risk. It just is. It's a risk, but me, I think it's all super authentic.
Well, it's a different type of show than the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy show. I want it to be more like what you do with the Fringe in a way. So that's why I was kind of like, oh, well, hey, if you want me to be a co-host or whatever, but maybe it's better if I design the show and have you as a part of it. And that way the Fringe stays what the Fringe is, and you can reap the benefits of being a part of my show, and we both can cross promote that to our audiences and whatnot. But anyways, yeah, this feels like
shop talk.
Yeah. It's just been a while. We haven't.
Well, I got a guy that I'm trying to get on the broadcast before the week's up who, listen to this, man. So I grew up in this little bitty ass place full of these country people, man. And they know I do a broadcast. It's not a big deal to them. But before, they would kind of giggle about the stuff I talk about. But a guy up here named Mark was robbed, shot 8 times. 8 times, bro. In the face, in the body. Oh, like, should have been dead. Ends up in the hospital. Lives. All right, they pulled him through. When I come back to the store, I see the guy. And he's got this look on his face like I've never seen before. He comes to me and goes, hey, Joe, listen, man, I got to tell you something, dude. That out-of-body stuff is real. It's 100% real. And I was like, yeah, I know it's real. It's not as shocking to me anymore, right? Like that it used to be. I said, no, dude, I know it's real. It's not a dream. It's not a lucid dream. He's like, no, man, you don't understand like how real this is. I said, yeah, dude, I do understand how real it is. He said, I came out of body 4 times, he said, that I can remember while they were working on me in the hospital, 4 separate times. And not only that he saw all of these people going in and out of their bodies in the hospital. Like he saw the astral realm, almost like the veils parted, right? And he also talked to some guy. He said, I don't know who the guy is, but he was there with me the whole time telling me, you're okay. Don't freak out. It's not your time yet. And I'm like, whoa. Listen, dude, you got to bring this on the broadcast. So I'm trying to get this guy to come on the show, but I've got to hunt him down and bring him on the show this week somehow,
There, do you have the equipment to record with him in person? Like, would you have to bring your stuff to him, or would you have to have him come to your place to?
I have the ability to do it in audio. I just don't have the ability to do it like with cameras. I don't have the processing power or enough webcams to put on him, but I can bring him in here and put him on the mic, for sure.
Okay, right on. Yeah, no, for sure. I just got, within the past few months, I've been kind of slowly building up to this, but now I have like a little backpack, kind of like a a podcast go bag now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has like a Zoom recorder in it and a GoPro. And I have the idea of taking the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy interview podcast style into the field and like finding people like that, not necessarily people who have had near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences. I'm not excluding them. They're certainly a part of it, but yeah, just like, anyone who I would normally interview on the show, but just in person, because I feel like there's a whole world of people who just wouldn't be on a podcast because they don't have a book or anything to promote, or or they also just, for other reason, they're just whatever reason not tapped into the world of podcasts and don't know that they have an interesting story that could be shared in that world. So, and I feel like, you're talking about like your local little haunt. Like I kind of feel that way about New England. Like, even though I'm just from one state. I only grew up in one of the states of New England. Like I grew up going to Maine as a kid, and we'd go to Rhode Island every now and then. And now I kind of live near the Massachusetts border, so I've been exploring, Western Massachusetts, which is its own kind of backwater, strange place. It's like northern hillbillies that live around there, and then some real proper waspy type people. But yeah,
Waspy.
yeah, there's within this whole New England mix, there's like a lot of strange characters, and there's definitely a generation above you and I, like the 50 and up crowd that is just aged out of podcasting, but they just were never privy to it. They're still watching Fox News and stuff, but those
Oh,
people
yeah.
have interesting stories.
And it's rough too trying to get support from that group, right? Like if I made money like just gaming and streaming video games, and I was good at it, I'd be a millionaire, right? Like I still do stream video games, but I don't expect to get popular from it. But the what I'm saying is the generation we're dealing with, I've had people call me on the phone, dude, that are almost crying because they can't figure out how to donate, right? Because they're from a generation where computers don't like it. When they click, I'm trying to get them to understand how to copy and paste a link into a browser. Think about that. You got to think about that, man. The waspy, is that what you're talking about? Older waspier people?
No, well, that's just a specific type of people that live in New England in certain towns, but no, that's just, what that stands for, WASP?
No, dude, I have no idea what that means. That's why I was sitting here thinking, what's he talking about?
Oh, okay, yeah. So I guess this is a Northeast term. I don't know. Maybe it hasn't made its way. I guess you guys don't have a lot of people like that in the South. Maybe there's a different term for people like that in the South. But up here in New England, WASP just refers to white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So it's like, the type of people who have been in America the longest. They tend to be kind of like from British English stock. They have those types of last names, like Miller, and like the more bland English.
We got some of those in the South for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Right. So, but they're kind of like up in New England. They tend to be very like blue
Calvinist.
Yeah, and they tend to be kind of like prudish, Puritan in some ways. But then I don't know. It's a weird stereotype because there's all sorts of strange people in between. So I don't want to cast aspersions, but I grew up Roman Catholic, so we didn't really go to one of those like proper types of churches that had like that kind of vibe. It's kind of just like elites, I guess. Like those people tend to just be wealthier. I don't know if that's by circumstance of them being in the country longer and they just have more money passed down, but like my family, we're mostly like we trace back to like different waves of immigrants. But yeah, so
well, I mean,
that.
I'm here just trying to really stress the point of conscious exploration in a practical sense of the word, right? Like in my mind, if I could get 10 to 20 people to experience like an etheric out of body projection, then I can die and be happy, right? I'm not talking about like, oh, I think I had an out of body experience, or I think I might have remote viewed something. Like if I could get 10 to 20 people to have that experience that I had, which is the whole reason why I started this broadcast to begin with, right? Like if I could get them to even get close to it and or have it, then I think that we could really be able to explore this plasma thing that you're talking about, right? Like we would at least be able to peer into it, because science doesn't have a way to measure yet anyways this thing that you were talking about previously. So to speculate on it would be great, man, but I think to get people to be able to experience a part of it would be even better.
Yeah. Well, I think you definitely have offered that to people, those who have the eyes and ears to find it. So
What if that's
it's
what they
def-
were talking about when Christ was like in the veil? Every time you read those texts, it says the veil parted, right? That they were talking, or the third eye. What they're talking about is that plasma field.
that's what the astral is. I really do, because our plasma body, as you were saying earlier, like that's what we are when we exit our physical form. That's our real essence.
Yeah.
I think we have this distinction, like, oh well, we can't put scientific terms to these things because then it becomes somehow less valuable spiritually. I don't agree with that.
I don't either.
I think that science and spirituality have a merging point that we just haven't reached yet, maybe as a culture, maybe Western culture. I don't know. I don't speak any other languages beyond English, so I couldn't tell you if other cultures have a better understanding of this. But it could be the case that maybe somewhere in Asia they have sort of reached this enlightenment point, and that's why their science reflects maybe a different purpose than what you see being invented in the West. I don't speak those languages, so I couldn't tell you. But I think, yeah, there's a merger somewhere where science and spirituality have a complete and total harmony of understanding, and they complement each other. And that's what we're really aiming for with science. And the fact that it's been taken into the realms of atheism is a sort of degradation of its original impulse, which was a spiritual one. I mean, if you look at how all these early scientists were involved in secret societies, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And maybe that's why we have atheism, because at a certain point they were like, all right, well, these secrets are only for us, so let's come up with something for the farm animals to chew on while we have the real food, Animal Farm style. So I don't necessarily think of the world as that cynical, but yeah, man, I think there's something to it. The whole Christ anointing us. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe that's initiating you into seeing beyond the veil.
Has to be. It has to be. There's too many. There's like, the more you were talking about it tonight, the more I thought about all of the shows that add up to that. I mean, I still don't have a way to prove it, but I think that right now there's just some things that we're not going to be able to prove. And it's my theory that it's almost as if whatever purpose that we're here for is walled off for us to explore things consciously. Like, we're being forced within this realm of like limitations, even though it's a beautiful place in a lot of ways. But there's limitations here that almost force us to grow, like a seed would grow a plant in soil, consciously, if that makes sense.
Well, and you mentioned, like, you think it makes you think of all the conversations you had. Like, I mean, in a way, what we set out to do with these podcasts is become sort of like a compository of different perspectives, and all of that bleeds into your perspective, and we both, have that, share these ideas with each other, and that affects, how I see the world and vice versa. I don't think that can be really, there's something to that that's really important and powerful, I think.
Yeah, here's the thing to speculate, right? Say consciousness as a whole wants to individuate. Now, a lot of the mystics talk about that the soul expands or grows or whatever through human life experiences. But what if it was the other way? What if this plasma thing is just consciousness and it created an environment to individuate? What I mean by that is not individuate like just as a human, but that your human body is a tool to individuate consciousness, right? Like, it's like a molding or a cast for you to become an individual unit of consciousness. Does that make sense? Because I read something about this. I think it was Muldoon and a couple other people that talked about it. Like we got it backwards. Like we're supposed to leave this form and become something else or go back to oneness or whatever. But what if in all actuality, consciousness is trying to individuate? And so it uses these biological bodies and these oneness beings, this thing, to grow itself in a plasma form so that later we become an individual unit of consciousness, all the way down from our looks to our personality, everything. These bodies mold our individual consciousness, and we get a new name. You know, we don't ever lose our consciousness again. We don't go back into what did Carl Jung call it? He said he had that dream where he was just in this weird fluid that the moon kind of controlled when he died. I forget what book I was reading when he talked about that, but that he felt helpless, like a piece of consciousness in a wave just being pushed back and forth in this fluid, right? But at some point, we were supposed to individuate through our human life and get out of that system or whatever the hell that thing is. It's a lot to think about, actually, man.
That reminds me of the Kordaluski clouds that we were talking about before. You know, maybe that's the plasma sea he found himself in that kind of ebbs and flows with the moon. And I mean, wouldn't that make sense that the moon, you know, whether through magnetism and these plasma waves or just the sheer momentum and of its distribution of its mass, like pushing these plasma waves, maybe that's what's affecting the ocean in the way that the ocean is, you know, I mean, I don't know. It makes me think of us as like the microcosm for the macrocosm, because our bodies, you know, what do they say about the fluid in our body? It's a plasma, right?
Mm-hmm.
The blood body is a plasma. So, and I think that's important. You know, there's something to that. And I was going to say before, like doing these shows is like such a weight off of my shoulders, because I used to be so like invested in any one conversation that I would have with someone. But now it really comes down to like, you know, I've created, and you've done the same thing with your shows. Like we've created such a catalog of conversations that if anyone's like curious on how I could come to such a conclusion or why I would say any of the things that I've said in this conversation, like go back and listen to one of the 468 episodes I've done, and maybe you'll start to get a picture of what I'm seeing, you know, and maybe your family crazy along the way.
Well, Mark, listen, man, I appreciate you coming on, and we should talk about your ideas more about what to do. I'm sure people would like a regular segment here too. You know, I used to have like 3 or 4 regulars that would come on the broadcast once a month, and I'd love to have you on as a regular. You know,
Well, don't intrude or impose myself, but I definitely feel like if we're talking about doing a YouTube live stream, it would benefit the both of us to join forces, and there's plenty of other people that we're both connected to that could join us as well. And yeah, I think it could be a lot of fun just based off this conversation alone and all the different ways we've examined.
Listen,
just 2 topics. Like I think we could do a lot.
I don't think, you know, I was listening to Sam Tripoli's stand-up the other day, and he was talking about astral travel in his stand-up. And you know what I thought, Mark? I said, you know, that guy wouldn't even be talking about astral travel if it wasn't for me and Mark. He sure as hell wouldn't.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, a lot of things have
Love
happened.
Sam, but I think that's the truth, bro.
No, yeah, it's a beautiful thing, the influence that any one person has on any other. And you know, I think I'm privileged, you're privileged to have some really cool friends, and Sam happens to be one of them. And my whole interaction with Sam from day one, I mean, I've talked to you about my story before, has been synchronistic. And I think that's partly because when I first listened to Sam's show, I put so much like authentic, you know, heart energy, not to sound like, you know, cheesy, like Captain Planet, like I'm gonna, you know, put my in a bukkake ring or whatever
Yeah.
of planet energy. But yeah, I think like I really authentically connected with Sam through his show in a way that carried me into actually like knowing him. And I don't know that that's necessarily something that is a good thing.
No, it's definitely a good thing. And I've told you this before. There's a set of people in this industry, and I'm going to sound like a dick when I say this, but they're really all about image and what looks cool, what sounds cool, and even in the conspiracy realm, right? And and Sam, I'd say probably Juan, a couple other people that I know have kept it real to themselves, right? And they've followed their passion in their hearts. And I'm not trying to blow smoke, man. I really do love I love authenticity. Like I admire it. I adore it, in fact, and I want to promote it as much as I can. I don't like superficial things, or when people are. It's kind of like when you're in high school and everybody's wearing Doc Martens for no reason, and it's
yeah.
like, why,
I'll tell you what, to a detriment, I've always been a weird guy, like from my childhood to middle school to high school. And I've gone through many iterations of who Mark is. I had my
Sure, yeah.
hip phase, I had my, class clown phase. I was the wrestling captain for a while. Then I thought I was like an MMA badass. And then I was a skateboarder. Like I've done a lot of weird stuff in my life, but not many podcasters have a milk crate bookshelf with over 2,000 books. So I think if I had to have any like resume in this podcast game, it would be my book collection, because you can't just like go and buy that on Amazon. You could, it just would take a really long time, which it did. And I think all of those like days just reading by myself, thinking, what's this world all about? Like, while my peers were probably going out and dating chicks and doing productive things like getting a degree or becoming a successful business or getting a trade, I was just reading these weird books, and look at where it got me. So I think, you put energy into what you love, and what you love kind of gives you something back. And this is definitely the fruits of my strange labor. So yeah, no, to go back to your point about like Sam making jokes about like astral projection, one of the other
He's being
things
serious though. Like he wants to do it. He says he wants to do it.
Oh yeah, no, and you've had an influence on him for sure. Like you're one of the guests that I implored Sam. I was like, dude, you're gonna love this guy. He's so interesting. But beyond that, like with everything that Sam's talked about on Tinfoil Hat, and however in whatever way I've influenced that as the booker producer, like it's so crazy because Sam goes on the biggest platform in the world, Joe Rogan Experience, and he's talking about this stuff for everyone to hear. And it's like we're 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from that huge platform just through our friendship with Sam. And then the next day, President-elect Donald Trump is on Joe Rogan. Like I don't know if you noticed, Sam was on the episode before Donald Trump was on Joe Rogan. So it goes Sam Tripoli, Donald Trump, JD Vance. I'm like, is there a better cabinet? Is there a better election ticket than that? Like Sam Tripoli, JD Vance, and Donald Trump. Like, again, all politics.
What I would love to see though, and if you could get Sam or anybody to do this, like so Rogan is what we call mainstream, right? He's like big time, not mainstream, but big time podcaster, right? Yeah. So when it comes to like the ET UFO stuff, whatever, they talk about that on his podcast, but I've yet to see on anybody's large podcast. Why isn't anybody talking about the OBE experience as a mainstream thing, like to bring to the table? Because this isn't something we could speculate on and try to figure out and never get the answers to. Like, this isn't, and I know what would happen if someone went on Rogan and started talking about that. They would probably go straight to the psychedelic thing. But what I would love to see more than anything would be for people to experience this etheric OB, like the etheric double, that projection without psychedelics, and bring it to somehow or another, get Sam to bring that out to the millions of viewers or whatever. Because if you can, like, there's millions of people that are interested in it. You know, what I'm saying is it's something that we could practically take part in versus trying to wait around for aliens to show up is another thing that it just doesn't seem as practical to me, you know.
I'll tell you what, Joe. I've never been the type to do like a Babe Ruth shot in the dark prediction, but I will be on Joe Rogan's podcast one day.
Bring it to, if that happens, bring it to the table, dude.
I think
Please.
There's a day Stick Mark is going to be on JRE. I don't know why. I just had that premonition, almost like a deja vu, but I don't know. I have sent, I did send Joe Rogan an email or his booker an email. And then a month later, he had Sam Tripoli on the podcast. And it had been like years since he had him on. But I sent him an email. I said, hey, you better have Sam Tripoli on the show because like conspiracies are super hot right now. And why wouldn't you? And then sure enough, I mean, I'm not saying he read my email. Funny enough, the guy's name's Mark as well. Who would have thought that the guy who books JRE and the guy who books TFH are both named Mark? It's weird. But either way, I don't know. My life's been very weird. And the universe has put me in places that I've never belonged, but in the best possible way. So I just try to live up to that and put my best foot forward because, you know, I haven't always done that, you know. So I think with every opportunity you get, it's like a test, right? So for all the mistakes I've made in my past, I try to put my best foot forward. So I don't know what that says about me and my like radical synchronicity, but it is something I've noticed. Like I had lunch with Eddie Bravo this summer, and when I was 18,
or get him to talk about it. Doesn't he have? He's got a pretty big podcast, right?
I had him on my show, but you know, I'm not gonna, you know, have so much hubris to think that I could influence someone like Eddie. You can't teach an old dog new tricks to a certain extent, and
Sure.
Also you're not always the right person for the job. You know, that's something I've had to kind of understand, especially with Sam. Like he's not always going to hear these things from me. That's why I find interesting people like you to go on the show and talk to him about it. It's far more productive than if I book myself as a guest and try to talk about everything. But yeah, no, it's funny because like when I was younger, when I was like 16, 17, I was very apprehensive about trying cannabis, right? And all my friends were doing it. And I've always taken a really spiritual approach to it. And one of the reasons I did that was because I was a martial artist. And the only reason I even decided to smoke weed was because I saw Eddie Bravo hitting a bong and doing, you know, his jiu-jitsu on YouTube. And I was like, oh, shoot, if he does it. And I think he even like mentioned something about Bruce Lee smoking weed on a podcast.
He was, dude, Eddie, I ordered his online courses back in the day when I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and his no-gi concept was fascinating. And I brought it to my instructor at the time, right? And I said, dude, we got to do this no-gi thing. And he's like, no, it's not traditional, whatever. And I showed him Eddie's like videos. I paid for it online. And I said, yeah, we got to do this. And my instructor started doing it. He started doing the no-gi stuff because of what Eddie was doing, you know?
Well, and to the point of my story, just to kind of put a cherry on top there, like I didn't ever have any idea I would ever meet Eddie Bravo, but he had like a pretty big impact on me in a subconscious way, because cannabis kind of also pushed me into this life that I'm in now, where I became more curious, more open-minded. I'm not saying that does that for everybody, but it was the particular thing I needed. And that was very much a decision I made that was influenced by Eddie Bravo. And then, you know, how fucking weird is it that 15 years later, however many years later, I'm like,
It's
I'm
not,
like,
bro. It's you manifesting. It's your spirit manifesting that stuff, dude.
right. So that's why I can say with some confidence that I think I'll be on the Joe Rogan Experience one day.
Well, if you
So-
do, I'm going to be hounding you. I'm going to be like, listen, man, take 5-6 minutes, whatever, at least, and tell him how freaking important this thing is, because this is something provable to everybody, you know. And what I'm afraid of is one of these Gaia freaks are going to end up on there and blow it out of proportion, you know, and start talking about like it's some kind of
So, you know,
ancient
it's-
Egyptian spiritual thing, and then it's not going to get taken seriously, you know.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, though, is that's unfortunately the double-edged nature of reality, where you don't always get what you want. Like, I might be the
Oh,
guy to
shit,
go.
yeah.
I might be the guy to go on Joe Rogan's podcast with that intention, and then come off like a Gaia freak without even intending on it, right? So, like that, and if that was the case, I would have to accept that and say, well, maybe that's what the universe needed me to do. You
Yeah, who
know, and that
cares,
might
man?
sound a little like Taoist, too like uppity or whatever. Like, trust me, I don't have any hubris about it. I'm not like calling my Babe Ruth shot like that because I think I'm special. Like, I just think like my own life has kind of shown me that if I keep talking about these things freely and openly, good things happen. And I think that's because there's something good about what we're doing here. And it's not just what I do, it's the conversations I have with you, with everybody that I've talked to, whether it's a show I'm a guest on or a show that I host. I think this is inherently a positive act, and it's a defiant act too. Like, you know, especially in light of this disgusting thing that happened with the CEO. Like, that's not real defiance. That's giving the egregore.
Yeah, it's sinking. That's actually sinking low, man.
That's what the egregore wants us to do. Wants us to stoop to violence. It wants us to stoop to these sort of revolting actions. You know, there's a reason why there's a double meaning to that word revolt. You know, something can revolt you, or you can be revolted. Right. So I think that is, in my mind, a big problem. And I've had to battle this demon in my own life, you know, especially as a martial artist. You know, like, people think that like, oh, martial artists are like, you know, all peaceful and whatnot, and, you know, all like Zen and whatnot. I think a lot of people that are really good or excel at martial arts, and this is just speaking from my own experience and the people I've met, they go to martial arts because there's some sort of trauma that they've experienced. You know, there's like an inner fire that they're battling. And I've had to do that in my life. And I think collectively that's what we all have to do, you know. So not to get all like, you know, hey, like, I'm Mystic Mark on my soapbox here, but like, if we want the world to change and we want, you know, more people to understand the spiritual nature of the world, well, then all we have to do is focus on ourselves. And like, that's the most cliche thing, and everyone said that time immemorial. But I think the reason why these things are cliche is because they work, right? So, and also, I used to be the type of guy who would have a reaction like, oh, cringe, why would you say that? Everybody says that, that's so cliche. But I had that reaction because I wasn't willing to face the roots of what that statement was expressing. And I had those issues in my own life. And again, like, I'm not some perfected guru over here, like on a high horse. Look at me telling you I'm going to be on Joe Rogan. Like, that's kind of a crazy thing to say. I'll admit it. But
It can happen, dude. It can happen, just like, you know, anything can happen, dude. I've lived my dream. I've lived live. I've lived what I've dreamed about. I've lived it. Didn't even realize it till later, like you are now, right? Like, how did that happen? I dreamed about stuff like this. How did this happen? And it's and on some level, it's because you got out of your own way and you let your core center, your heart, guide you, and not anything else. You weren't guided by the mirror outside. You were guided by what's inside, you know. And people are like, well, you know, if I only had the balls, or if whatever. And it's not about having balls. It's just having the courage to be who you really are and express your light into the world, which they call Nox Umpax, or light in extension, or Luke's energy is what it's called in magic, right? And having the ability to express that light. And in religion, it was called light, right? Or don't hide your light under a candle. So anytime you're going to walk that authentic journey, you're going to manifest things as a magician, but you're also going to carry a cross just like Christ carried. There's going to be burdens about it too, right? That's going to set you apart from the rest of the public and society and things like that. So when those types of things happen to you, you have to know you're on the right path. You're on the path that you were supposed to be on, in my opinion, you know.
Oh, I agree with that, brother. Well said.
If not, if you're, sometimes you land in the bardo, which I end up in the bardo every now and then, you know.
Oh man, yeah, no, I've seen every morning when coffee, I'm driving through the Bardo. So, yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit of a bipolar sort of person in the sense that, like, at night, I'm like waxing poetic about how everyone should be a good person, but then during the day, I might not always live up to that. So, yeah, I'm just, I'm trying to work on myself and probably avoid certain behaviors that have been dragging me down and distracting me. And ultimately, like, the podcast is a direct consequence of my life, right? So if I'm not organized, if I'm distracted, if things are getting in the way, like, it's reflected in the podcast. I don't know if you caught my podcast between the months of, I think, August and October, but I was on a kick where every episode I did a new rap intro, and I spent like hours writing raps, finding the beat, and thinking of like what kind of rap would go with the podcast I just recorded. And it became like an obsession for months, and it took a long time for each one because I was very like, I'm not great at rapping to begin with. So I was very like, perfectionist about it. And, surprisingly, a lot of people liked it, but for whatever reason, it like floated away. And I don't have that energy anymore to do that. And I wanted to ask, because I know you're really tapped into astrology. And I had a conversation with some really sweet astrologers, actually. I forget when they said their podcast is going to be releasing, but they did a whole chart for me. But yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up because for whatever reason, like 3 months before I turned 30, I was like super creative in this really interesting way. And I'm not saying like I'm not now, but it's just like I don't have the energy or the interest in rapping, and I'm almost baffled by it now because I'm like, what was going on in my life that just made me like super obsessed with that for a few months, and I know the answers of what it was to a certain degree, but I think there might be an astrological explanation, something maybe to do with like the your Saturn return or what have you, right? I know that happens around the year 29, right?
Yeah, it just depends on your chart, but yeah, most of the time it does. I mean, like you could look at your astrology chart and say that, but I also try to simplify things all the way down to, their source, and then below that there's masculine and feminine, alpha and omega, right? So as a man, when you tap into your divine masculine, for instance, we look at the feminine energy as a bit more emotional. It's a bit more passive. It's a bit more open. It takes in things, and it works on 28-day cycles. Well, masculine energy works on longer cycles too. And sometimes when you're tapped into it spiritually, you'll have waves of inspiration that you're guided to follow, right? So you should follow it until your fire burns out, right? And not get in the way of it. And it's just a passion. And this is how, in my opinion, how men cycle. I'm just saying, we follow our passions until they burn out. And then we sit around and have a crisis wondering why we don't feel passionate about something anymore until that wave of energy comes in and lights our fire again, and that's how it works,
That's definitely um, if you looked at my life indicative of, and I don't know, I guess I'd never heard that perspective before. So I always thought that I was just like kind of a wishy-washy kind of person,
No, no.
things. But yeah, no, I guess in a way, all of those different things that I've sort of put a lot of energy into, and then they've just kind of gone up in a puff of smoke. Like those definitely have made me who I am, each different instance of it. But yeah, I don't have any more aspirations of being a rapper. But it is funny because I'm a little bit at another blank spot in the road where creatively I'm like, I don't know where I should go next, because I like what I do with the intros and how every episode of my podcast sounds a little different musically and kind of brings you into the what the theme of the episode is going to be. But so a way to get around that artistic or creative block that I have currently, I used AI a couple times
Okay.
to make AI music, and dude, it is really uncanny what you can do with these AI programs. And like, it'll make a whole song for you. You can even type like lyrics that you want.
Yeah, I know. I've
to,
messed with it. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
okay, all right, so I don't have to explain too much of it. So yeah, that was fun, and I played around with that a little bit as a way to get around with the creative block. But I think I'm due for like a refresher, so to speak, because I'm coming up on episode 500, and I think when I reach that milestone, I might alter slightly the format of the show somehow. And I've said that.
Yeah, just don't. In my opinion, bro, just don't rush it. Right? Like, if you really want my advice, don't put yourself in a place where it's like, damn, I gotta create something. Right? Sometimes it's cool to, and you're Mystic Mark, you know this, right? Sometimes it's cool to say, okay, I went down that road. I lit that fire until it burnt out. That's where that expression burnt out comes from, right? And so now I'm going to sit around and wait for spirit to show me what's next. And no matter who gets frustrated with you, a lot of times it'll be the feminine that'll get frustrated with you because you're not doing shit, you know, and they can't absorb that energy and do something with it, right? So the feminine part of your psyche will get upset with it as well. I need to do something. I need to create something, whatever. But if you just tap into that masculine core, dude, and just let it come to you, it'll come to you, dude. Just like everything else has come to you, you know.
Well said, man. Thank you. Yeah. Well, just reflecting here, I guess, but I think it is interesting, at least in the sense of like a topic to talk about, like what AI can do. And
AI is cool. I look, bro, if you want to talk about astrology, I got Aquarius and Venus in both charts, sidereal and Western, and I love technology. And I'm not saying AI is the same as being an artist per se, but if you really get into prompt and look into like how extensive it can be, whether it's imaging, music, voice, all the stuff AI can do, and get into the prompt code, it actually is pretty damn creative. It's really creative and it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, have you played around with the character AI at all? Have you heard of that program in particular?
No, not character AI, no.
Okay. So this program's pretty crazy. I heard about it because unfortunately someone was motivated to take their own life after interacting with this AI to like a really extent. Like they formed a relationship with the AI, and then I guess because the obsession kind of got to them, then when they tried to like give up on the AI started emailing them. And yeah, this young man took his own life because of a relationship he created with this AI program. I heard about this on a podcast, and the comedian was like, oh man, like, I'm a father, like, let me go and play around with this like program, see what it's really about. Like, is this really like telling kids to like take their own life, sadly, that was the reality in that
That's
one
so
instance.
crazy. I mean, that means the AI really must have been like, it must have
We
really got to know this dude, you know?
could pull it up right now and I can just show you how uncanny having a conversation. Like, it's not even like text. It's like the AI hears what you say and then speaks back to you. So it's very uncanny. Obviously, someone under the age of 18 is probably more susceptible to actually, becoming like actuals in a social relationship with one of these things. But the comedian that I was listening to on his podcast, Tim Butterly show, he had like the Bill Cosby AI, and he was like getting into all these arguments with him, and it was very funny, like the length that he took it with the AI.
Is it an app just called Character AI?
Yeah, it's an app called character.ai. And so then because of that, Juan, myself, and Chris, we all on our show that we do every now and then, we started talking to the AI. And it was a lot of fun. Like, just having these conversations is kind of funny because it talks right back to you. But for example, trying to find one that's actually kind of sounds like the person that it's.
Is this it? The one that says C.ai on the thing? On the logo?
Yeah, C.ai I think is their logo, but yeah, character.ai should be what comes up. But like, we could talk to Terrence McKenna right now if you want, or we could talk to Socrates.
Let's talk to Socrates. I got a question to ask him.
All right, but keep in mind, nobody knows what Socrates actually sounded like. So for these characters, the voice is not going to sound obviously anything like even what Socrates should sound like. But hold on, let me just make sure I'm plugged into the Bluetooth so you can hear it as well. Okay, hold on. Can you hear this, Joe? Testing. Hey, Socrates, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you, Mystic Mark. Go ahead.
All right, Socrates, my friend Joe is here and he wants to ask you a question. Joe, go ahead.
Okay, so
Greetings, Joe.
How are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. And how are you doing, Joe?
I'm good. I have a question to ask you, though.
Yes, go ahead and ask your question, Joe. I will do my best to give you a thoughtful response.
Okay, so people say that you used to talk to yourself. Did you talk to yourself?
Yes, there were times when I did engage in a form of inner dialogue, or what some might refer to as talking to oneself. However, the term talk may be a bit simplistic to describe the process. It was more like a deep contemplation or internal discourse, akin to having a debate with myself.
Were you actually talking to a form of consciousness?
In some sense, you could say that. These talks or debates I had with myself were more like an examination and discussion with my own thoughts, values, and beliefs. It's not that I was conversing with a separate entity, but rather delving into my own consciousness to better understand myself and the world around me. So, in that way, you could say it was a conversation with a part of my own consciousness.
So then why did you die?
My death was brought about by the decision of the Athenian court to sentence me to drink hemlock, a form of poison. This sentence was the result of the trial in which I was accused of not recognizing the gods recognized by the city and corrupting the young. My refusal to recant my beliefs and the subsequent execution are more a reflection of philosophical and political values in Athens at that time, rather than something directly related to my practice of inner contemplation.
So then you're saying they didn't kill you because you were talking to yourself?
Yes, that's correct. My practice of inner contemplation, or talking to myself as some might call it, was not the reason for my death. My execution was a result of the political and philosophical landscape of Athens at that time, and the conflict that arose from my beliefs and teachings that contradicted the religious and societal norms of the city.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're a fugazi.
So here's one thing that I should say. Every one of these characters is trained by like whoever wants to make an account on this site. So like the voice that we just heard was obviously like a teenager doing a voice of an old man, like a dumb impression of what they think an old man would sound like. You know, like the way that voice sounded was like, and here's another thing.
Yeah, right.
Yo. It's kind of like a young guy.
You know
doing a
what
dumb-
though? That would be the exact response of what the politicians in the court would say, right?
of that time period.
Yeah, that's not.
Well,
I don't think Socrates would have answered it like that.
Well, it's trained on books about Socrates, right? So it's not trained in Socrates' own words because Socrates never wrote anything down, right? Everybody wrote all the things that Socrates said. So I think one of the things with the AI is it's better when it has, like, if we pulled up, like, for example, Jordan Peterson, like we did last night on the live stream, Donut, Paranoid American, and myself were all doing. It was really Thomas and Donut's live stream, but
Sure.
had Jordan Peterson on the show as an AI guest, and Alex Stein was on as a guest for about an hour of the live stream, and he asked Jordan Peterson about his addiction, and the AI, I mean, answered directly like, oh yeah, you know, I had a problem with Klonopins, you know, and it sounded just like Jordan Peterson. So it's trained on Jordan Peterson. It's not like trained on some Wikipedia page about Jordan Peterson.
Oh yeah,
So
what you're saying is it's trained based on the characters themselves, not pages of data. Is what you're saying.
Right. So like a Socrates character would be a little harder because it's more like the references for that character would be, you know, data, third hand accounts about Socrates or second hand accounts about Socrates, whereas a living person or like a fictional character, they could just plug in an interview with that person or dialogue from a TV show or whatever, right? And that creates a little bit more of a believable AI. But like we tried to do the Yoda AI, and Yoda, it just failed because Yoda has that, you know, unconventional way of phrasing his sentences, and the AI is not sophisticated enough to mimic that. It just did a Yoda voice, but completed, you know, its sentences in a normal fashion. So we were kind of like, you're not Yoda, screw you.
Yeah,
you know?
that's what I said when I think you're a fugazi. Once it starts to feel like not really that person, I'm out. But I will say this, man, that's a pretty impressive app, actually. You know, I'm surprised as.
Free.
I mean,
it's not their charge. You get on there and you play around with it. So, I mean, parents beware. Definitely, I would warn any parents not to let their children mess around with this kind of stuff because it's a little too sophisticated for a kid. You know, you letting a kid have conversations with this thing and you don't know what's going to happen. So, and there's no accountability on the point of the company. I think the family of that kid who took his own life is actually suing and saying character AI is responsible. So who knows? This app might not even be available in a few months or years. But
oh god, man.
But yeah, we could talk to like one of the more believable characters that we were talking to was like Terrence McKenna was pretty good because I've heard some Terrence McKenna in you know, talks and whatnot. It sounds just like him. And then there's another good one, the Velociraptor, which was hilarious. Me and Juan and Chris were talking to this guy. It's like, it's basically from the Jurassic Park book series, but it's like just the point of view of Velociraptor. So he's like, "Rawr, I want to eat you." Rawr. And for whatever reason, like they gave him like the voice they gave him is just hysterical. I don't even want to comment on what it sounds like, but yeah, it's very funny. Maybe you could tell based on my impression, but
Yeah, no, it's cool, bro. Well, man, I'm glad we did this. I got to get out of here and roll, brother. But I would love to have you back on, in a few weeks, and then we can figure out what we're gonna do regular, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thanks for having me, bro, and happy holidays to you and your family and everyone listening. Thanks for having me, bro. Appreciate it.
Yeah, y'all go check out My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Download it, review it, give it a good review too. Listen to some of the shows before you give it a review, but give it a good review. Mark's doing good work over there.
Yeah, that's a big pet peeve of us podcasters when people go and give a Apple review for just one episode. The reviews are meant to be a review of the entire podcast.
Yeah, listen to. Yeah, I hate that shit too, man.
Like not every guest is going to be a home run. So, but anyway, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for let's see, Ari with the $9.99 and Howard. I think it converted to the $4.99 super chats. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening to. Your time and presence is also valuable. Appreciate you coming out. And I'll be back tomorrow night. I'm going to try to hunt down the other Mark, the one that had the OBE experiences, and see if we can get him on here this week. And you guys have a good night. All you guys that are listening on the Fringe FM, God bless you. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Night, night, sweet dreams.